Greetings, guitar fans. It's Lindsay here from Maple Street Guitars. And today we're going to take a moment to tackle a question that often comes up with regard to fingernail maintenance. Certainly many of you out there are fingerstyle guitarists, and for those of you who endeavor to keep your own natural nails, that can of course be very frustrating, especially if you're a steel string player like myself, as those strings are of course very hard on the nail. But regardless of what kind of string you play, it is always the case that something in life causes an accident and you crack a nail or break it, often when you need it the most, right before a gig. So we're going to take a moment to discuss one of the methods here that we use to repair and secure a nail. It is very effective and certainly very easy to do. So we're going to go step by step. And of course, if you ever have questions about this kind of stuff, feel free to come by and visit us or give us a call or find us online at maplestreetguitars.com. So here the all-important thumbnail has been cracked. As very often is the case, people have areas in their fingernails that are more susceptible. Everyone's a little different. This thumbnail of mine tends to like to try and crack right here at the quick. There's some little weird part of the shape, which by the way is why it's important to kind of continually file your nails and try to eliminate any kind of burr or funky section that might continually cause cracks or breaks. But anyway, as you can see here, we have a lift. This is a dire situation. The whole nail will want to peel off if I don't do something about it. So what we're going to do is treat this with a silk wrap, which is a little different than some other approaches. So we're going to go through how to prep the nail surface and then how to apply these, and at the end of it, I'm going to have a thumbnail that's going to be extremely useful for a good long time. So real quickly, we're going to take a moment to discuss the supplies that you will need in order to do this job well. Not all of this is essential, but some of it will certainly make your life a lot easier. Right here we have some acetone. Nail polish remover is essentially acetone with a fancy name, but you can pick this up at any hardware store, Ace or Home Depot or whoever's going to have it. It is a very caustic chemical, so you definitely want to take care and use this in a ventilated space. But we're going to use this to clear and prep the nail surface. In my case, I have applied some super glue to the fingernail, which is now failing, but that was just to keep it together long enough for me to get here and make this repair. So I'm going to use the acetone to break down the super glue. And quick note on that, should you use silk wraps regularly, chances are you're going to have to reapply one before your nail fully grows out. And in doing that, you have to use this to kind of break down the old one and get rid of it so that you can do a fresh one. So very important, very helpful. Next up we have the all-important silk wraps. These are Swiss silk. You can get them online. They can be kind of hard to find in a local place. A lot of nail salons, supply places I should say, nail supplies, will only sell to you if you have a beautician's license, which is absolutely absurd in my opinion, but that is the case. So something like this might be best off as an Amazon purchase, but it is essentially a very thin layer of silk. You have a cross grain here, so a little bit of a matrix, if you will, that has an adhesive backing. And basically what this allows us to do is lay a lamination over a broken section of your nail, or even the whole nail itself if you just want to strengthen it, and wick super glue into that. So that's the process we're going to be doing, but again, this is a close-up shot of it. It's going to come in different sizes, so you can cut it to shape as I have done here. This is a pre-prepped one for my needs today, and $7 really well spent. So next up we have the glue that we use. This is a super glue, in this case Loctite. We get it at our nice local Shep's Ace Hardware in Grant Park. Local shout out to them, our favorite. But the super glue liquid is essential for this. You do not want to use a gel. The liquid is going to wick into the silk and it's going to dry more evenly. More importantly, you can pull off excess of that with this paper towel. So again, do not use a gel liquid. I also prefer not to use the more customized super glues that we have in the back, which are like a very thin super glue. That can get really runny and run all over the place on you. So this is perfectly fine. Again, readily accessible just about anywhere on the internet or your local hardware store. This right next to it is a little bit of more of an exotic thing and a non-essential one, but this is a super glue activator or accelerator. And what this does is it basically instantly cures a super glue, so it makes it a lot faster to work with. You do want to give it a couple seconds after you apply it, but we get this at Highland Woodworking, which is in our general vicinity. This is not an everyday find in your typical Ace or Home Depot or Lowe's, so this might be something, if you want it, you need to order it, but it is extremely handy for this application and other super glue applications. So finally, we have some of the abrasives that we use in this process. A kind of non-essential one, but one I like to use, is a 3M superfine sanding pad. This is roughly equivalent to about 240 grit sandpaper. It's a little coarser. This is good for quick buffing and also shaping the nail. It's good for cutting some of the excess of the silk wrap should you have an overlap or something like that. We'll get into that in a minute. But you can substitute a regular sandpaper. 250 to 500 grit is fine. But this cushioned backing makes it kind of nice to work with. What I do consider part of an essential here, again, not a relatively accessible product, but something that's going to give you excellent results, is this 500 grit silicone trimite paper. And I want to be very quick to disclose that this is not your typical 500 grit. It has an initial cutting property, but it basically reduces to a polishing surface really quickly. So do not confuse this with a everyday garnet 500 grit sandpaper. If you only have that kind of stuff at your disposal, you want to go with something really high and fine, like a 2000 grit if you can get it. That's roughly equivalent to something like this. But this is essentially a polishing paper with an initial cut. So finally, we have your all-important nail file. This is just what we're going to use to reshape and, again, get rid of any kind of excess that might occur. So definitely an essential if you use your fingernails on the guitar, regardless of whether or not you're repairing them. So as I mentioned, I have applied some super glue to this nail to get it salvaged long enough to make a better repair. And I need to get rid of this before I apply the silk wrap. It's lumpy, but it also inhibits some of the bond. So the way I'm going to do that is use this acetone conservatively applied to a paper towel. It will evaporate pretty quickly, but again, this is your nasty stuff. You do not want to be in a room with it that's enclosed. So I've applied some to the paper towel here, and I'm working it around the surface where my nail had super glue. I don't have definitive evidence of this, but it's not good for your nail as far as I'm concerned. So I try to limit how much of it I get on anything other than the surface that I'm trying to treat. This may take a little while, particularly if you have, an existing silk wrap on your fingernail that you're trying to replace. It can take pretty liberal application of this acetone, and again, it's okay to buff the nail with an abrasive to kind of speed it along a little bit, but you want to be very conservative with this because it's essentially thinning the nail. So we're going to do a little bit of that because I was a smart guy and did not put on too much super glue. So if you want to be really thorough in this matter, one of the things I like to do is to gently work open this nail. And this is kind of hard for you guys to see, but I'm separating it, and I have a little bit of super glue to apply into that area. Again, I'm being pretty conservative with this, and I kind of work the nail to ensure that it's gotten in there. So now I have some super glue applied before I even apply the silk wrap. So that's kind of stabilizing the crack, if you will. I'm going to give this a little squirt with the accelerator, which instantly cures the super glue. So now I can go right back on. I've got some stabilization going on there. I'm just going to check it for lumpiness. I've got a little bit, so without melting that glue too much, I'm going to buff this. And it's nice and smooth. Real quickly, going to work the edge of the nail with the file until I'm happy with that being a nice smooth surface. That's looking good. So now we're ready to apply the silk wrap. I've gone ahead and pre-trimmed this one. It's a smaller, or I should say thinner section than some of the others in the package there. But that's because I'm only going to cover this little quadrant that is the affected cracked area. I'd like to leave as much of the nail exposed as possible, because it is my belief that this kind of application fundamentally weakens the nail. So in a perfect world, I'd like to keep this little area isolated until it grows out, and then hopefully my nail is once again kind of its normal self. Acrylics, which you get at the nail salon where they frequently applied over the whole surface, those definitely affect the strength of the nail to the point where you become kind of reliant on them like some sort of nail crack addict. You don't want that if you can avoid it. That's one of the reasons I use these over acrylics. So I'm ready to apply this guy. I'm going to peel it off of its backing, which can be a little bit of a challenge at times, but I'm a pro. And I'm going to get it kind of in place here. And they can stretch a little bit. You can kind of manipulate it. So in this case, I've allowed a little bit of an area to extend below at a diagonal. That does not bother me. In some cases, it can actually make it a little easier to work off in the future if I need to replace it. But I'm pressing it into place here, kind of prepping it for the glue. Now you'll notice there's some overlap here. That does not bother me. I'm going to let the file and the sandpaper do the work to get rid of that. Once I'm satisfied with this, I'm going to use my liquid glue, and again, be careful. I work from the back end to apply this, and I'm going to let it wick into the matrix of this stuff. So as you can see, the silk is kind of keeping that glue in place a little bit as I apply it. Now you can use toilet tissue or paper towel, but I like to pull the excess off towards the front of the nail. As you can see, some is coming with it there. So the idea is I just have as much super glue as I need, no more. Now you can either let this dry, or again, if you have an accelerator handy, you can apply some to the nail. This stuff is also really very toxic, so try not to breathe it if you can avoid it. And now this is nice and hard and dry. So I'm going to trim this, and then I'll show you how to reapply. Now I guess I broke continuity on our video here in that I did not present this as a possible tool that one might need. But here we have a razor blade, which I prefer to use when trimming this excess after I've applied my first coat of super glue. And one would be very careful with this, but you just it's okay if you have overshoot a little bit, but I can get behind this and cut it very easily. But for the sake of those of you who may not be comfortable with that, I'm going to just show how you can take a file and also just work the area around the nail and the excess silk wrap will just abrade off. Again, you do this after your first application of glue because it gets successively harder. So here I'm pretty much ready for another application of glue. However, I still have a kind of rough surface from the first application. So we will take care of that by just giving it a quick buff with, again, this kind of more super fine but certainly coarser than polishing paper, 250 grit. kind of go with the grain of your fingernail, as you can see I'm doing in one direction. Still a little bit coarse. There we go, that's looking nice and smooth. So, we're going to repeat the same process. So try to find the seam if you can. It can be hard to see. That's one of the beautiful things about this application is it looks pretty natural. But I know it's right here. So we're going to apply some more glue. Kind of get it in the light so you can see. And now once again, using a paper towel, I'm going to pull the excess towards the front of the nail, which also makes me certain that I have gotten the whole surface covered. Hit it with our handy dandy accelerator. If you're not using an accelerator, you can expect to sit around for a couple of minutes while that really thoroughly dries. That's looking nice and hard. So we will buff it one more time. And you can do this as much as you really want, but I would recommend that you keep it to maybe 3 or possibly 4 coats if you've got a pretty nasty break. And on that note, I will say that for those of you out there who simply just struggle with really weak nails, you know, this can be a very effective way of strengthening your nail with, again, no reliance on a nail salon for heavy-duty acrylics, and no having to cash in man points in doing so. Alright. Give this one last buff here. Now, being as I'm a little neurotic, I'm going to give it one extra little bit right along the area that was giving me trouble. That's a total judgment call on your part as to whether or not you want to go there, but I'm about to be on vacation, so there won't necessarily be access to these things. I'm going to take some precaution. Okay, that's feeling nice and smooth. So our final step is to use some polishing paper. So I'm going to snag a piece and we'll go from there. So once again, here we're using this silicone trimite paper. Just to show you, that's a fresh piece. This is one that's been in use a little bit. It starts to develop a very polished area. I'm not going to use this fresh piece because these will actually last for quite a while. But if you get a sheet of this, you know, be conservative with it because it's really designed to be used continually until it's almost ratty looking. So this is also available for sale here at Maple Street Guitars should you feel so inclined. But this next process is really just a little bit of elbow grease. I'm going to just polish the nail. And that can be best if you use your fingers kind of like a cradle here. It actually creates kind of a concave surface. And I can just kind of work the nail against them. Incidentally, this is the same kind of paper we use to polish nut slots and saddles when we're making those components for guitars, and it gives a nice smooth surface. So, having done that there, that nail's looking pretty darn natural. I would challenge someone to find the seam where I applied this silk wrap. So, and the last step after doing that is just to work the area underneath the nail where excess glue might have gotten, and just kind of reestablish the polished edge of your nail. So again, working those areas that might otherwise catch a string or something. Again, you can see how this ends up being a polishing surface. Right there. Done. Good as new. So once again, this has been Lindsay here at Maple Street Guitars with a brief tutorial on how to salvage your fingernails with a silk wrap. There are, of course, many other techniques for salvaging a nail, but this is one that I have found to be highly effective with long-term application, something that you can easily repair and do yourself. So I hope the video helps you out. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to give us a call or find us on the web at maplestreetguitars.com.